All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Sprinkling Your Data Estate, Building a Unified Data Platform with Microsoft Fabric. Before we get started, there's just a few housekeeping things we'd like to go over. First, this session is being recorded and will be sent out to you. Second, please use the Q&A panel to submit any questions you may have, and we'll answer them throughout the webinar. At this time, I'd like to introduce Daniel Pascal, Data Architect at Quisitive, and Daniel Crowley, VP of Data at Quisitive. Daniel and Daniel, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney. As stated, we're certainly happy to join everyone today and talk through data modernization, preparing yourself for AI. My name is Daniel Pascal. I am a data architect here at Quisitive, really focused on the pre-sales side of the house. See a lot of delivery patterns over the years as it relates to this topic. So look forward to diving in. Daniel, anything from you?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Daniel Crowley here. I'm Quisitive's VP of Data. Been building Microsoft solutions now going on 5 years. Was an early adopter of Fabric and looking forward to talking about how we can enable organizations for AI readiness. And moreover than that, been in the data space for the better part of a decade. So leaning back on being a data scientist, senior data scientist, got my degree in data science with a focus in machine learning and AI prior to coming into the consulting space. So looking forward to chatting about use cases as well as how we can prepare you guys for success, and looking forward to any questions.
Yeah, worth noting, we're going to go through some topics here, but if you have questions along the way, we're happy to jump over and answer those, so feel free. Getting us started here, you can see, it's worth mentioning that, when it comes to the topic of AI, that everyone is kind of in a similar boat at this point. Everyone is trying to plan for and implement AI use cases, trying to find some sort of competitive advantage in this space. And so if you're not doing any planning or preparing for AI, you are going to find yourself behind. And we'll talk a little deeper in some subsequent slides here about what that means and what we're seeing in the market as it relates to those who adopt early and those who spend more time in preparation and kind of finding that right balance. But certainly, as it relates to AI, we're seeing a lot of early adoption with co-pilots and some automation with our manufacturing clients, seeing predictive models being built out that are providing a lot of value. And we're kind of on the front end of this big kind of AI agentic phase, where we've built a lot of generative AI solutions and using a lot of agentic AI to automate away as much as we can and really push that ROI story.
Yeah, adding on to that a little bit, Danny, digging a little bit deeper into the Microsoft resources themselves, a lot of organizations are starting in different places, depending on, we'll say, the technical capabilities of their individual teams, as well as the use cases that they're trying to identify. You might have been an early adopter of M365 Copilot. You might have wanted to add on some additional capabilities and moved into Copilot Studio. Or maybe you've actually been trying to focus on, we can say, more custom machine learning opportunities, whether or not that's going to be on the predictive analytics side or leveraging the large language models and neural networks. And that could be Foundry, Databricks, data science inside of the Fabric estate. But what we are seeing is folks are starting to assign, we'll say, individual tasks at the digital agent level, and then creating workflows into, we'll say, building those agents or connecting those agents to one another in order to create digital workers. And with those, we want to just kind of surface some of the opportunities that we have around increasing the accuracy with those solutions, and then also increasing the confidence scores to avoid some of the shortcomings that we see with moving proof of concepts into production.
One of the key challenges with data that we're running into is, most organizations, they don't struggle with the lack of data. They struggle because they have too much disconnected data, too much data complexity, siloed data in varying states. And when you start preparing for AI, a lot of these things get magnified a bit. So, key things we look for when we're helping clients try to clean up their data state in preparation for AI is looking for duplicate data sets, looking for fragmented pipelines, disconnected tools that are out of support. And then, seeing what kind of conflicting KPIs or metrics are out there and known at the stage that we're doing an assessment. It's a critical phase in kind of establishing a path forward, understanding what the return on investment might be associated with use cases, but really going through and understanding what the data challenges are, because some of these challenges can be masked if you're only focused on analytics. There's workarounds and things you can do, but once you kind of apply that AI lens, a lot of these data issues become amplified and magnified, and can affect adoption. So there's certain things we look for early and start solving quickly. And Daniel, you got anything there?
Yeah, just kind of doubling down on organizations, depending on how fast you were really trying to adopt, we'll say analytic use cases. A lot of organizations had fragmented departments, right, where they were leveraging whatever the best tool set was to them for whatever that given purpose was. And so what we see a lot with organizations is just a lot of different tools to be able to do the same job. And what I mean by that is if we were looking at data visualization tools, one group may be using Power BI, another one utilizing Tableau, ClickSense, ClickView, Crystal reports, whatever it may be. And with, those additional data reports, you end up increasing, I'm going to call it technical debt for the better part of the conversation, because individuals or teams are learning how to develop those skill sets and leveraging those tools disparately. And what that can do is create some inefficiencies as we're creating centralization, or we're really trying to increase velocity and time to delivery with being able to collaborate across teams for use cases that require data sets that are available to different groups. And so creating that alignment, regardless of where it is in the data maturity pyramid, the data governance side, master data management side, focusing on data quality, getting into data engineering, whether or not you've adopted data lakehousing or data warehousing. Data visualization, I've already kind of hit on a little bit, but even when we get into the machine learning solutions, I've referenced the Copilots before previously, but we know that there's a lot of other tools out there that you can leverage as well. There's Data Robot, there's AWS and SageMaker. All of those tool sets, right, require a lot of upskilling in order to be able to leverage efficiently and be able to get solutions into production. And so a lot of what we're really trying to reconcile, right, and where we think that there's going to be a really good opportunity moving forward is centralizing, we'll say, the technical debt associated to maintaining all of those different tool sets in order to drive velocity, and then also be able to add in the, we'll say, low code, no code capabilities so that users have less of a time, we'll say, time to becoming a subject matter expert and be able to create solutions on their own. Back to you, Danny.
Yeah. So how can a data estate that's got various issues kind of break your AI progress? But what are some of the implications there? AI systems, as we've been learning, these use cases that succeed, they're only as successful as the data that's feeding them. And one of the primary reasons we see use cases die is data problems. And that setback can really cost some time and money, and it's often kind of glossed over and overlooked in kind of the enthusiasm to get an AI solution out there as quickly as possible. Poor quality, inconsistent data is going to have a negative effect on your AI models. And as a result of that, as you start interfacing with the output of AI solutions, you start to run into inaccuracies, conflicts in your data, and it puts a real damper on adoption. it's been one of the main reasons that we've seen adoption for AI use cases fizzle. And we've, learnings that we've had over the course of the years where we've been delivering in this AI space, we've really doubled down on getting that data right. Both in the pilot stage, which is a little bit easier, but making sure that the underpinning data systems are scalable such that your production version of that AI solution is going to continue to give you the accurate results that you were looking for in pilot mode. So it's important to get those, to get those kind of underpinning considerations handled early.
Yeah, Denny, I really like what you said there. I mean, to add on a little bit, when I think about traditional analytics, I think about a lot of row level detail. And again, not to say that we're not also going to be addressing unstructured and semi-structured data, but a lot of essentially getting high transaction volume data aligned with operational analytics is getting into a structured data repository. And associated to that, with everything being in row level detail and having columns associated to it or easy fields to be able to associate, it's very easy to be able to identify the outliers that may essentially be impacting your downstream KPIs. Whereas when we start getting into the AI and the machine learning side of the world, and leveraging large language models and just putting them on top of your data estate, those neural networks can become a little bit of a black box. Again, you can definitely go through the discovery of figuring out how each of those individual fields and data sets data elements are being leveraged within the neural network themselves, but it becomes difficult to communicate and even more difficult to understand. And so having essentially the wrong data source is really going to be able to impact your organization's adoption of that solution, because it becomes more difficult or less transparent in order to be able to identify the data elements that could be skewing those large language models.
Yeah. So when we're talking, about this assessment stage or what we're looking at early, it really leads up to recommendations. What shift is required to kind of get you there? What shift gives you that unified platform, standardized patterns, single source of truth? Make sure you're AI ready. When we talk about this with clients, we're usually talking about kind of a shared governance model, shared definitions, data definitions within a shared unified data catalog, shared platforms, shared visibility, both from admins and end users, kind of bringing that single pane of glass to your data estate. Getting that clean, trusted, centralized data is where we're trying to get to. But this isn't just a technical issue. Oftentimes it's a kind of combined technical and cultural issue. Data owners play a big role and typically have to adapt to some of the centralization and some of the change that we go through in these kind of engagements. So it's a bit of a OCM, organizational change management consideration, in addition to being a technical consideration. And we tend to need to work both aspects with organizations to really be successful. Anything, Daniel?
No, let's keep going, Danny. I totally
right.
agree.
So, what one of the key things that we have talked about here is, the fact that when you do have issues with your data estate, a lot of times when you're just focused on BI, there's a lot of things you can do to ensure that you can get, consistent BI results, that your scorecards, your dashboards are reflecting what you need them to reflect, even if you have some problems in your data estate. Once you look at AI use cases, especially when you're talking agentics, you're casting a wider net as it relates to your data. And it could really magnify underlying data issues that you kind of patched over when you were, focusing on analytics, like most of us have been doing over the last, decade or so. So as you make the shift into agentics, there is, this kind of a need to look a little deeper into your data and find any kind of underlying problems that could be surfaced through AI. Because once you surface that data and surface any problems, that's then you have to go into this phase of regaining confidence in end users who are seeing data problems. Anything on that one, Daniel?
I think this is just really kind of double clicking, on what I was discussing a little bit earlier, is that the traditional BI approach was more easily interpretable when the data may be wrong or incorrect. Like I can't speak enough about the number of times that, I was developing reports earlier on in my career where individuals were just able to point to an individual element and say, hey, this isn't right. This record doesn't look right. Somebody might have fat fingered, this digit and added an extra figure in here. Whereas on the AI and agentic side, it becomes more about the adoption piece, because the AI model itself, well, we can still leverage research agents and we can be able to do some things associated to the cleanup, don't have the same level of transparency. And because of that transparency, we want to ensure that when we're moving our models into production, that they're going to be well accepted by the organization and adopted. Because early on, when we don't see a high level of data quality on the response side of the LLM world or the AI world, organizations are really quick to move back to what they know works instead of figuring out how we can be able to enhance the solution.
One thing worth mentioning too, we were just at FabCon with our one of our clients who partnered with us. We did a session there with Cat Plugs, who's a plastic molding company for industrial parts. They are one of the biggest players in that space internationally, with offices all over. We are looking at customer churn and some other AI use cases with them. And in looking at those AI use cases, we started finding more and more data issues, and data performance issues actually came up. And so we did kind of do a reset with them. And we talked about this in our session, where we took a couple steps back and really solidified their data foundation. They had some on-prem servers that weren't performing well that we had to do some work on. We used fabric mirroring to get a lot of their data available in the bronze layer so we could start using it. And then we've been doing a lot of work coming off of that initial work around improving data consistency and getting them ready for future AI workloads. So we kind of went in there. They had some really good ideas on AI use cases that we think are going to be very valuable. But as we started digging in and finding some data problems, the journey kind of took us back to their data foundations. We did a lot of work in that space, and now we're building on that data foundation and looking at use cases that are going to be more viable now that we've got that data in place.
Danny, I'm really glad that you brought up FabCon as well, because I thought there were some really great enhancements and takeaways out of there. And since we're just kind of also talking about the AI journey itself, one of the big things that's kind of been agreed upon are going to be the, we could say, agent to agent protocols, or the modern context protocols that have been put in place that allow each of your individual agents to talk to one another. That's kind of where I get excited, because basically what we can be able to do now is connect one agent for an individual task, assign that agent an agent 365 as being able to complete that task and which data source it's going to be associated to. And then what we can do is chain agents together in order to be able to get more complex and better outcomes. The other piece then was the integration with SQL Server 2025, or T-SQL capabilities now that are going to be in the Fabric estate. So we don't have the limitations previously known with the functions or methods inside of the data warehouse environment themselves. So now it's going to be a lot easier for us to be able to lift and shift the stored procedures that you may historically have on your on-prem or other SQL databases into the Fabric estate, which decreases your time then to be able to reproduce your workflows inside of the data warehouse environment. And moreover, instead of just feeding that now to downstream reporting inside of Power BI, what we're going to be able to do is figure out the tasks that we were leveraging or trying to reproduce what the use case was inside of the Power BI environment through an agent. So using natural language to be able to ask questions or build visualizations on the fly and be able to gain those insights more quickly.
Which takes us to Microsoft Fabric. Imagine that most folks on this call have an idea of what Fabric is. We won't get too deep into it, just to say that, this tool has made building out this data platform for our clients, preparing them for AI solutions, a better experience for end users, administrators, and we found a lot of power in Fabric and what it promises. It's, hit the market several years ago. Its feature set was still fairly skeletal, but it's really grown out over the last few years, such that it's meeting a lot more of our clients' needs, and is becoming kind of that enterprise solution for a lot of our clients. That's that foundation for their future AI workloads, mostly because it's a SaaS solution that brings everything in-house that you need to work on from a data perspective. So whether you're talking about engineering, data integration, landing data within Fabric, data science, we just worked with a client on building out a new Fabric platform and POCing a machine learning model for one of their manufacturing processes that proved out to be really valuable. So we're seeing, using Fabric, getting data aggregated within Fabric, organized in Fabric, and then layering on top of that data science and AI is a quick way of solving some of these data issues, and advancing some of these use cases. As it relates to, with Power BI being kind of part of the SaaS solution now, that integration with Fabric has proved, to have a lot of benefits moving forward. Asking questions of your data is becoming easier and easier with Copilot built in as well. So we're seeing a lot of value in the way Fabric has evolved over the years, and using it as that key platform tool for our clients.
Yeah, Danny, I mean, we're not even actually highlighting all the integration components that actually exist in the Fabric estate with this slide, right? Like we have data engineering here and data factory or data flows, but we also have data warehouse environment. We have the SQL environment. Of course, we have the data science environment in here and the real-time intelligence. I'm really glad that you called out the Copilot piece. But the other part that I was really excited, and this was kind of coming out of Fabric or FabCon, was the we could say the security opportunity in the CI/CD that was added into the native Fabric estate, right? And what I mean by that is that now instead of having to have your developers work inside of Azure DevOps or GitHub in order to be able to build out their actions or their pipelines, right? We can now manage CI/CD internally within Fabric to be able to manage our production pipelines through dev, test, UAT, and prod in a way that we couldn't do before, right? And so what we're doing now is being able to minimize that technical upskilling in disparate data sets to where we can enable teams to be able to self-service themselves within one consolidated environment and not having to use disparate tools to be able to leverage it. Not to take away that those historical or traditional software development lifecycle opportunities that we used to do don't exist, because very much so, if you have a centralized IT group, then you very much still can assign users inside of your Entra ID, allocate those users into groups, and then by those groups create policies. that'll still enforce the same level of security downstream. Moreover, from that, then is it's still entirely okay to be leveraging Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions in order to be able to promote. So if you historically are doing your unit testing, your integration testing, performance testing, regression testing, using the traditional SDLC, that's still going to be available because everything's going to be Git supported.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, how is Fabric moving the needle as it relates to this topic? You know, we've talked about kind of that single pane of glass, that SaaS service. It's ultimately about reducing duplication, shared governance across the organization. That allows for lower operational overhead, and it allows for end users and analytics engineers to have faster access to trusted data in various states. With AI solutions, you might be looking for data in its raw form. That certainly comes up a lot with generative AI. We have data in its kind of silver layer state with all the deduping and cleanup done and any transformations done. And then, of course, the more recent evolution has been kind of pointing your AI solutions at semantic models and taking advantage of mature semantic models, especially when you talk about asking questions of your data and those sorts of things. So all that can be done within Fabric. A medallion architecture in Fabric can really take you a long way in setting you up for future AI workloads, having that data in one place with that one lake concept and organized such that you could use it in its different states for different purposes. Daniel, anything there?
Yeah, I just think that what we're really trying to highlight here, the key takeaway is that what we're trying, what Microsoft has been able to provide to us is going to be a software as a service solution that is creating a unified data platform that allows multiple teams with multiple backgrounds to be able to contribute to an outcome or a business use case in one collective environment. Like when we talk about the one lake, everything that's inside of Fabric is going to be supported by Delta Parquet. And then all of the integration components that sit on top of it are essentially built into it. So whether or not you're utilizing the data flows, data warehouse, data engineering, even getting into the real-time analytics and the KQL databases, all of that data is still going to be stored in your Fabric One Lake and accessible to all of the data engineering developers that you may have in the organization. And that's going to stem anywhere from your, we'll say, business analysts to your, I'm going to just say your data engineers, your data scientists, and then even some of the executive team with self-service reporting. I mean, again, let's not sell it short on being able to right-click on a data set and be able to generate visuals, or the Copilot capability that's going to be native, where you can ask questions directly against your data.
Yeah, so we've been dealing with these consulting engagements for years now, and there's a pattern we like to follow as it relates to AI readiness, and it's this assess, rationalize, unify, operationalize process. And just thinking back to Cat Plugs, our recent FabCon customer who went with us and helped us present, this exact process kind of came into place. They had some AI use cases they were interested in. We go in there, do some assessment of their environment. We find that their data state was having these issues that had both data complexity issues, data performance issues, and some data that was conflicting. So we went in there and took some time with them in figuring out what the problems were. These were problems they've been battling with for years, kind of got those figured out, and then went into our rationalization phase where we started helping them fix through those, step through those problems and get those fixed. it really created that that confidence that we needed to start talking AI use cases and in a manner that would drive this thing forward. Confidence in the data was a problem, and that improved after we kind of went in, understood that there were some problems, did a deep assessment, and then started to work through those problems and get them ready for more productive AI conversations.
I would add into that and even be able to take a little bit of a step back, because whenever you're going to be delivering use case and solutions, it takes a lot of collaboration across a lot of different departments. And so having organizational awareness of the technical skills of an individual team, the technical assets that a team is using, and then aligning those two things to your organizational roadmap are pretty pivotal for figuring out how long it's going to be able to complete your objectives. And so we can even have a step before evaluating the individual data estate to take a look at what is your organizational strategy, what is going to be the level of effort to be able to deliver those solutions, what is going to be the return on investment once we've completed those solutions back to the organization, to identify short-term wins, prove out the proof of concept, upskill individuals on the new solution that they could be leveraging moving forward, while still meeting the strategic initiatives that we can be, we'll say, chipping away at through the better part of a year. So Danny, I mean, again, like to the points that you were making there, I like on that side where when we get involved and we're talking about assessing an individual organization, we want to make sure that whatever we're building or whatever we're going to be suggesting is going to be the most scalable, cost conscious and efficient in order to be able to deliver that to the business in the quickest way. And so a big part of that is once we have those pieces aligned, is then identifying where does the data live in your organization? What is the data quality that's associated to it? Do you have any undocumented or tribal knowledge that's associated to maintaining that data in order to be able to move that through your reporting mechanism and create your downstream KPIs? Moreover, from that, what are you using as far as pipelines go? And again, that can be manual in a way that we work with organizations that could still be leveraging Access today, or they could be doing a considerable amount in Excel and VBA in order to create those calculations, similarly to what you would be doing in the silver layer of the data lakehouse. And then is there any duplication of those data sources that have tweaks to them across varying departments that truly change the definitions associated to the data in a way that means that you should leverage a given data set for one use case, but it can steer you in the wrong direction very quickly and early on with another one. So once we've identified we could say that we've put together the strategic roadmap for an organization, we've aligned that then to the team, we have an understanding of the data that exists there. We can group that into whether or not it's going to be unstructured, semi-structured, or fully structured data sources themselves. Each of them then can be supported with a metadata-driven pipeline or a stored procedure that we can leverage in the T-SQL or SQL Server environment inside of Fabric. Or we can use we could say a more traditional PySpark workflow in the data engineering component in order to be able to create your one source of truth for a given use case. And the big call out there too is when we're creating that one source of truth, is there any deduplication that we can do with creating that solution in a way that enables another department to be able to leverage the same data set and minimize the total size of the data in the data estate? Which then means you have also more collaborators that are going to be focusing on that individual data set, which in my experience, and Danny, I hope this is in yours as well, is improving the data quality, and then essentially giving the organization more faith or confidence in their downstream reporting so that they feel better advised in order to make directions for their organization.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd layer on there is that what we tend to run into a lot is, we have clients with these large data estates. So going through and finding out which data sources are really critical to what we're trying to achieve from a use case perspective, an analytics perspective, and prioritizing those is a very useful exercise that we find ourselves doing. Sometimes, it's a bit of a discussion with the client and working through, their understanding of the use case and really understanding what data is going to make that use case successful, and starting our data remediation there. We move from assess to rationalize. You want to take this one, Daniel?
Yeah, more than happy to do it. Getting back to, I always talk about the disparate data sets, or the shadow IT departments that happen within every individual organization, just in order to be able to get things done, right? And so once now we have a good idea of, we could say, your technical estate in an organization, then what we want to do is we want to find where there's going to be duplication of data assets, wherever that may be occurring. That could be at the AI level, that could be at the data viz level, that could be data engineering, even some at the data governance level, depending on if you're going to be using, if your organization is multi-cloud, and what we need to do is be able to address multi-cloud data sources. So what we want to do then is, lack of a better word, is we want to minimize the amount of technical assets that an organization is leveraging in order to minimize the technical upskilling required associated to those teams, so that people are able to collaborate in a similar way, which also then enables individuals within your groups, your organizations, your corporations, to be able to move freely from one department, one environment into the other one, and still not feel like they're having to learn a new tool in order to be able to drive a business outcome. Which also means then that your business use cases and the delivery of those use cases becomes a whole lot more predictable. Danny, is there anything you'd add to that?
As it relates to rationalization, I still always look at it through a business lens. What business value are we creating by solving some of these data issues? So really prioritizing with the data sets that are driving the most business value first, and then working your way down from there. So you start getting some wins earlier, which helps with the adoption, helps show the value both to end users and leadership as you're going through that process. Ultimately,
there can be significant cost savings associated to also aligning on an individual asset as well. When we're talking about Fabric, we highlighted that from a data perspective, OneLake will support data engineers, whether or not they're using warehouse or if they're using lakehouse approaches. By moving to Power BI, which again, I believe is best of breed in the visualization space, we now can have low code, no code business analysts generating reports or interacting with Copilot, because the documentation from Microsoft on how to build solutions is freely available in the Copilot. So as long as you have access to Copilot, at any point you can ask, how can I create this? How should I do this? So getting more closely to self-service solutioning, right, is only going to add benefit to the organization, because more people can focus on business outcomes rather than on development.
And ultimately, we're trying to get to step 3 here, where we've unified a client's data estate. We've created a single source of truth, created some trust within the organization around the data, and it really facilitates those next steps, where you build upon this foundation that you established, kind of proved out, and gained trust on. One of the things is when you do have that central data solution, that OneLake solution, now you can start taking advantage of really powerful semantic models. I know when we deliver these data platforms and then build out use cases both in the data and AI space, we have engineers that really focus on the semantic models and building that out. That's their special skill. and there's some art there and some science there, and having a team with that kind of experience and history, delivering semantic models, building semantic models, and delivering that kind of value that comes from those semantic models to our clients is something that's proven to be a key success factor for us. Getting those semantic models right is something a lot of our clients need help with. Those that have really strong engineering shops sometimes take care of that themselves, but it's certainly an area that most our clients need some maturity, some training, or need to work with a partner to kind of get there in terms of semantic models. Anything on the Unify slide there, Daniel?
No, Danny, I think you knocked it.
This one we've kind of been talking about the whole time. Next, when we've got that platform in place, now we're operationalizing that data, making that data utilized, usable at scale. Surfacing that data through AI solutions. Where this tends to where the maturity journey tends to go is, starting out with AI co-pilots. And if your data estate is in good shape, Copilot can be a really powerful tool. There's of course not just data quality considerations, but there's security considerations. And when you've got those things in place, Copilot's a really good way to get started and start driving interest and adoption in AI. But from there, once you have that foundation in place, you could start looking at agentic solutions. You could start looking at predictive solutions, machine learning models, those sorts of things. At FabCon, every data scientist I ran into, I asked them to what extent they were working on ML models. It seems to be on a little bit of a dip right now, just from my informal poll at FabCon. But I don't think that's going anywhere, and the use cases around machine learning models are can't be handled necessarily in other ways. So I imagine this pendulum will swing back a little bit. We'll start seeing more ML models and in the future as well. We certainly just had a recent machine learning engagement, and think those will continue to be part of what brings value to organizations over time.
All great points, Danny. If I could add a little bit in here, and the core theme, I think, of what we really wanted to be able to talk today is that if we can, we'll say, centralize all of your data in an environment where we're still able to empower all of your developers to be able to build solutions, it's going to allow your organization to be a lot more efficient in moving things into production and focus on more so what business outcomes am I able to drive, and how and evaluating those outcomes to the value, like what are they bringing back to the organization. So when we can connect to those data sets through data agents, or being able to shortcut or being able to mirror, those different features allow us to have access to a wide range of data sources, which basically allows us to empower all of the developers across your organization. And from there, then, because now we have the data in one spot, or essentially a singular location, those individuals now can focus on data discovery and data assessment to identify where there could be records or there could be key value pairs that are, we'll say, affecting or negatively impacting your outcomes, whether or not that's KPI on the data visualization side, or if that's going to be in your AI solutions and your responses. So what we want to do then is centralize the data sources themselves, or at least be able to provide access to it. We want to make sure that we're taking into consideration conceptual, logical, common data models so that we're minimizing the data duplication. We have now the empowerment of different developers to be able to build their solutions that they are used to being able to function in order to improve the data quality for all of your downstream reporting or AI needs.
That's one thing, Daniel, is when we're talking about, having this data estate in the, appropriate shape for AI workloads. The agentic scenario is probably the one that stands out the most, where there's a lot of risk, right? We've got, with agents, it's not just that, they can surface some bad data. They can action, and deliver results that are wrong. So they can go out and do the wrong thing based on bad data or bad business logic within your data foundation. So it's just an extra risk. These AI agents are really powerful, but there's this extra risk around agents going in and taking the wrong actions because of data problems. So that's kind of the key call out here. And one of the things, when you're preparing your data estate, you do have kind of agentic solutions in mind, data quality is even more important. So what happens if you don't fix the data layer?
Danny,
Go ahead.
I was just going to hop in here a little bit because I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time for questions at the end. But very much so, what we want to do is make sure that we're focused on the business outcomes overall. That's essentially the key takeaway from everything is how do we drive more business outcomes? How do we help organizations be more cost effective? And how do we help them achieve their strategic goals? Right. And one of the ways that we do that is with the adoption of AI and with being able to, we'll say, have data in a centralized location, being able to improve the data quality of your data sources themselves, then being able to create a reliable AI or KP output. It is how we see organizations move the quickest, to move the fastest. Moving into the next slide, Dan, what success then really looks like is when we get to work with organizations, and of course we help them get there, is creating an amount of trust that's going to be associated to the data. We've empowered all of the developers within an organization in a similar tool set of what they've been working, and then giving them tools to be able to learn where there's going to be any technical gaps. Then once we have those trusted data sources and we have teams that are capable of driving the solution themselves, we can sit AI on top of it to be able to, we can say, promote adoption across the organization of those AI solutions. And then what we want to do is, of course, make sure that all of those things are being handled securely and that those AI agents are being monitored themselves. So from what I was saying earlier, the security perspective can be addressed with Entra ID assigned to groups, assigned to agents. Inside of Agent 365, which ties very well into Fabric because it's still within the Microsoft ecosystem. Those agents are going to be discoverable, reusable across varying departments. We have monitoring capabilities then that are coming down into Purview as well, so that you can see what users have access to what data at what times, and the security is persistent. In the Fabric environment, the reason why all of that is important is because we can chain the agents inside of Fabric using MCP, or Modern Context Protocols, for those things to be able to communicate with one another. And now what we're doing is we've increased the velocity across the organization because we've minimized the conversations around trust, or we've minimized the hallucinations that are associated to the AI solutions themselves. So people are adapting, people are building more quickly, and because they're able to build more quickly, we're driving more business outcomes. With that, let's go ahead and make sure that we have a little bit of time for questions. We can chat to the next steps. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I mean, this is the last slide, and then we'll jump into questions. But I think one of the key things to keep in mind here on this slide is really focus on a use case rather than trying to modernize everything at once. That's, been a key factor for success for us, is really landing on a use case that's going to provide value for our clients. We help them often with that ROI story. We look at it from a business perspective and a technical perspective, really understand what we need to do to make that use case successful, and that drives a lot of momentum. So, thinking about it kind of one use case at a time, I think is a good focused way to do it. You can't, when it comes to your data estate, it's asking a lot to boil the ocean. So if you have a use case you're focused on, you can start with the data sets that feed that use case. You can start with some of the challenges you find associated with that use case, and then you can extend that or scale that across, those learnings across your entire data estate over time. Any final thoughts, Daniel, before we get to questions?
Honestly, Danny, I think you nailed it.
So yeah, we've got 10 minutes left here. Very open to any questions. Courtney, anything you want to say on this slide in terms of the feedback?
Yeah, thank you guys. What a great presentation. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We would love to hear from you guys. So if you have any feedback on the session, please fill out this survey. It'll enter you to win a $100 Amazon gift card. But thank you again, both Daniel and Daniel, for a great presentation today. And I'll also share the link out to that form in our chat. It looks like we do have a few questions in our Q&A right now, so we can go to those if you'd like.
Fantastic.
First one is, how quickly can organizations actually see AI value once Fabric is in place?
I can take a swing at that first, and
Sure,
I'm going to give an answer that nobody's going to want to hear, but I'm going to say it depends. A big part of essentially putting together the strategy and the roadmap early on with what you're trying to achieve with AI solutions is going to determine the level of effort that's required in order to drive the right level of confidence. But if an organization already has, a curated data set that they consider to be their one source of truth for a given KPI, then you can leverage an agentic solution right on top of it with a high level of confidence. But if we're doing something like trying to connect to an unstructured data set, a SharePoint repository that hasn't been, we'll say, well kept, right? Then there's going to be an amount of cleaning that would need to be done with those unstructured data sources. Maybe that's as simple as saying we want to take the newest date by topic for any given file. But generally speaking, there's going to be some nuances to that. But we can put in context to be able to address some of those issues. There's some of those solutions, and then chain those together in order to drive an AI outcome. We've done, I would say, AI POCs in little as 4 weeks. And then we've also taken on AI initiatives in several service lines that have gone anywhere from 6 to 12 months. It just really depends on what is the current state of the data that is needed in order to aggregate, in order to put an AI solution or several AI agents in chain in order to be able to leverage that piece. Danny, would you say anything different or add to that?
No, I would just say, our clients don't always know what all their underlying data problems are when they get started, on this path necessarily. And so when we go into these POC motions, sometimes we surface things. So just be prepared. You might learn some things about your environment that you didn't know before, that were maybe being masked over, through some, from an analytics perspective. But as you're working in AI, you're finding that you've got to do a little engineering work on the back end to kind of get you ready. As long as you're prepared for that, I think you'll have the right mindset.
Great. We did have another question come in from AJ. How do you deal with organizational friction in decentralized matrix businesses that might not be ready to adopt such broad centralization? What I mean is, how do you manage to change in organizations that have decentralized as a key element of their culture?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we certainly run into this a lot. You do have a lot of different kind of organizations that will have issues like this, especially like holding companies. We work with some holdings companies that have very siloed organizations sitting under their umbrella. You also see it with state and local government and agencies that are fairly siloed sometimes. Um, I, from my perspective, this comes back to finding a good use case that is going to, you know, find the right starter use case that's backed by a reasonable amount of data that's manageable, that you can go in and do some engineering and make sure the outcomes of that use case are really positive. Get that early win, and you have to do more showing than telling, I think, with a lot of these organizations. Show some success, show some return on investment with a kind of reined in use case, and then build out from there in terms of adoption. We typically, when we get these engagements, it's part technical and it's part OCM because of that exact challenge you're talking about. So we tend to we're delivering AI solutions. You end up with a team that includes like a data engineer and an AI architect and an OCM representative who all help out, not just with the technical, but with the messaging.
I mean,
Awesome.
adding on to that as well, Danny, like the other part is that, success is really attractive, right? And so a couple things, like one of the powers of Fabric is that even if you have decentralized environments, it's really easy to be able to connect and ingest those data sources. But second to that, where we've had success also with decentralized groups is by identifying where those individual groups have opportunities to be able to leverage AI and then evangelize the outcomes of those, we'll say, of the POCs that we were able to move into production and capture the ROI across the organization so that their enterprise level, we'll say leadership, or we could say the elected or the executive leadership, takes knowledge of what an individual group is doing and how they're leveraging it and how they can start using it elsewhere. So very much so, even if you're working in a decentralized environment where your individual department has an opportunity, you can still be successful. And then through your success, evangelize that workflow or that technical capability across the rest of the org to help with adoption.
We're noting too here, looking at the slide that Courtney has up, we do have this Fabric Design Lab as a way to get started with clients really understanding AI use cases and what they're trying to accomplish, and looking at it, in a design lab where we're going to bring kind of an AI consultant and a data consultant together, and really look at this, and oftentimes a security consultant in there as well, to look at these use cases in a comprehensive manner. So we do, in an engagement, a starter engagement like this, really like to understand, and help you understand all the challenges you might encounter with this use case, how we think, you could architect and deliver on your use case, provide that next steps and roadmap. But beyond that, this is kind of a starter engagement to get going on these topics. We do find ourselves, with clients doing starting more with maybe a data maturity assessment, something else that we do, or maybe they want to start with a unified data platform and build from there. So a lot of areas we can get started with clients. A lot of kind of lenses our clients are looking through as they're going down this journey. And we're happy to meet clients where they are, be as agile as we can be, flexible as we can be, to try to align with what they're trying to accomplish and not come in too heavy. But certainly this design lab is a good starting point if you're wanting to get the conversations going and get the right people looking at your use case.
Awesome. We did have one last question sneak in if we can get it answered in this last minute, but we had how do you rationalize the cost of larger capacities to clients who already have expensive cloud storage solutions that are siloed and fully integrated in their environment?
A lot packed into that one, Daniel. You want to?
Yeah,
I didn't even hear all of it. Say it again.
you got it. All right. So how do you rationalize the cost of larger capacities to clients who already have expensive cloud storage solutions that are siloed and fully integrated into their environment?
Got it. So I think getting back to what I was talking about with, sorry, I was talking about earlier, the assessment part, right, of your organization, just as in its totality. Like, what is the cost of ownership of our solutions today is something that should be known or documented in some capacity. And then what I would look at is the ROI associated with the business outcomes of migrating a solution or adopting a new technology to be able to identify whether or not that migration makes sense and what is going to be the value that comes back to the organization.